evidence in the law and decide if that evidence supported the filing of any criminal charges against Darren Wilson. They accepted and completed this monumental responsibility in a conscientious and expeditious manner. It is important to note here and say again that they are the only people who have heard and examined every witness and every piece of evidence. They discussed and debated the evidence among themselves before arriving at their collective decision. After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments. The physical and scientific evidence examined by the grand jury, combined with the witness statements supported and substantiated by that physical evidence, tells the accurate and tragic story of what happened.
Scenes of fury now on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. This is after a grand jury there decided not to charge policeman Darren Wilson over the killing of teenager Michael Brown earlier this year. These pictures right here are the latest coming out of Ferguson, Missouri. Police have used tear gas on a crowd of rioters who were throwing rocks. Several stores looted, cars and a dozen houses set on fire. Again, these are the latest pictures here from Ferguson. We understand automatic gunfire has been reported. At least 1 police officer has been shot. Several journalists have been injured covering the unrest, including a producer with RT's video agency Rupley, who was hit by a tear gas canister. RT America's Manuel Rapallo is in Ferguson right now. We can cross live to him to find out the very latest where he is now. Manuel, glad to see you. I know it's very, very noisy where you are. It's the early morning hours now. Can you tell us the latest here?
Right, so like you said, you know, there's a lot of activity still going on for it being 4 in the morning here in Ferguson. We're surrounded by fire department, surrounded by police. Right behind me, fire department is still trying to get a hold of a fire at an auto parts store here in Ferguson. If you follow with me right here, there's another store that appears to have been burned and looted as well. The same is the case for countless shops, countless structures, many of which are still ablaze. Now, I believe it's been at least a dozen structures that have been burned to the ground here. And as you mentioned, there was reports of automatic gunfire. There was this strip that we're at right now. This is where a majority of those violent protests took place, and those instances where police were shooting rubber bullets, tear gas canisters, as you mentioned, as well as the crowd dispersing the small explosives that the police use. Now, the saddest part about it, of course, is the amount of structural damage done. As you mentioned, as we mentioned, there's that fire going on behind me, and that the same is the case for another building down the road and several other businesses here who will have to be dealing with the cleanup tomorrow. Now, thankfully, there weren't any serious injuries. You mentioned that a police officer had been shot, but there haven't been any fatalities reported. So at the very least, that's good news, as people soon to be awakening to the aftermath later today.
He won't allow us to go to our cars. They won't allow us to vent. They said they wasn't going to use shields and abrasive tactics and tear gas, where everything they said they wasn't going to do, they're doing.
When I got here and I noticed, you see the line right here, I see the car on fire, I hear shots going off. And it's just, just people just frustrated with the whole situation of what's going on. The verdict was wrong.
So, Rory, as you hear these people that we've spoken to and countless others that have said the same thing, this is only the first night of many to come, as people aren't only legitimately outraged over this decision by the grand jury to not indict Officer Darren Wilson in the killing of unarmed African-American teen Michael Brown, but over the larger issue of racial disparities that lead to police abuse in small communities, which isn't isolated. It's not unique to towns like Ferguson, but towns all across the state and all across America. Rory?
Yeah, as you say, Manuel, certainly the anger has spread across the country. Manuel Rapallo, we'll check in with you later. Thanks very much indeed. Just as Manuel was saying, the frustration is widespread. Geographically speaking, it's just cruising across the U.S. Hundreds have stormed into the streets in Chicago, blocking traffic there. Then protesters also burning flags in Los Angeles as well. Los Angeles, Newport Beach, the traffic there being brought to a standstill. All the way up the northwest coast as well, Seattle, Washington, police using pepper spray and flashbangs on demonstrators. But not just on the west coast, the east coast. Have a look at this. Yeah, those are pictures right there from New York, where several hundred have blocked a bridge while chanting slogans slamming the U.S. legal system. Earlier, clashes broke out in the center of the Big Apple as crowds marched to Times Square. Hundreds also marched straight up to the White House in Washington, where some staged a lying down protest. And that's where RT America's Manila Chan reports from.
Hundreds are gathered here in protest right in front of the White House just hours after the decision to not indict Officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of unarmed teen 18-year-old Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. As you can see behind me, there are easily 200, maybe 300 people. People are angry. People are chanting. They're chanting, "Hands up, don't shoot. Black Lives Matter." Everybody's upset. Police are in force on all sides of the White House. So far, you can hear the anguish of the crowd. They're trying to get the point across after President Obama came onto live TV to talk about how there are better ways to handle this than looting and rioting.
All right, let's talk now to Teresa Rayford, an activist from Portland, who's joining us now here on RT International via phone. Teresa, can you tell us what's been happening in Portland tonight?
Well, in Portland, we started off at a college around 5 o'clock in anticipation of the verdict, and around 6 o'clock we gathered and walked over to the Justice Center, where a couple of hundred protesters joined us. And we marched for about a good 4.5 hours in protest, basically to mirror what had happened with Mike Brown when he laid in the ground for 4.5 hours. So for 4.5 hours, we protested up and down the streets and back to the Justice Center with several activist groups that came together in solidarity against the American justice system.
And Teresa, with you and your demonstrators coming together in solidarity, what's been your message for the people tonight?
Well, our message is that the disparities in Black America are caused by gatekeeper organizations that are basically benefiting from the poverty. And so with our movement, we're working with several college students across the country so that we can start working on re-changing the policies that govern our communities right now. Because right now in our communities, we don't have anywhere to go. Our faith leaders keep telling us to have hope and faith and that things will change. But we know that without legislation and policy change, things will not get better.
Well, indeed, Teresa, President Obama very quick to come out after the grand jury decision, calling for restraint on both sides. Are you seeing restraint on both sides?
I'm seeing serious restraint on both sides, but when you saw the verdict was read, the guy, he had blatant disrespect for the humanity of the people that he was speaking about. He talked so matter-of-factly as if this wasn't a problem. So I'm thankful that people are protesting across the country to let them know that this is not acceptable and we won't allow it anymore, not in our neighborhoods and not in our country.
Well, you say that you're glad that people are protesting, hopefully peacefully protesting across the country. What do you make of the police handling of the situation so far?
The police are doing what they're allowed to do. The law here in America allows them to treat us as second-class citizens based on the color of our skin. So their reaction to our protest is just basically blanket across the country. Here in Oregon, our team, we turned in a couple of police officers that had been in solidarity with Darren Wilson and had been promoting it on their Facebook pages as a way to taunt the protesters and the black community here, where several deaths have happened by the Portland police.
Now, you're certainly, geographically speaking, not exactly close to Ferguson, Missouri. Portland, Oregon is where you are now, but I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the violence in Ferguson. Some are suggesting that violent demonstrations are actually going to take away from the cause. Teresa, your thoughts?
Those are gatekeeper comments. It's not going to take away from the cause. We have gatekeepers because they're supposed to keep us in line so that we do not react, so that we do not unite as community members. And so don't listen to that. That's propaganda. This is going to make a difference.
All right, activist Teresa Rafer joining us live here on RT International. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us as well here on the program. As the violence erupts in the city of Ferguson, authorities have called up some pretty serious manpower and equipment. The National Guard has put armored vehicles and MRAPs onto the streets to help contain the unrest. There's at least 100 agents from the FBI. And the violence has prompted the Federal Aviation Administration to impose a no-fly zone over the city. And flight restrictions have also been put in place across the whole of St. Louis County. In fact, the county's police chief says authorities still don't have a grip on the situation.
I'm not saying there weren't folks out there that were out there for the right reason. I'm not saying that wasn't the case. But I am saying that, unfortunately, this spun out of control. And frankly, what I'm seeing tonight, and I have been up there all evening, right in the middle of it, along with Captain Johnson, what I've seen tonight is probably much worse than the worst night we ever had in August.
Well, the parents of Michael Brown, who was killed on August the 9th, have said they are, quote, deeply disappointed with the grand jury's decision. However, they have urged protesters to stay calm and avoid violence.